I have to say, when I was listening to that song on Spotify, I'm listening to it and I go, that song, performed, created in the 70s for the musical The Wiz. I'm listening to it going, they had a perfect sound studio, however many musicians they wanted, perfect recording conditions. And I'm thinking to myself, it can't be quite as good as that because that's Quincy Jones orchestrating that song. That's what I thought. But then I allowed the possibility that it could be better, and it was. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the song because I watched the video for this, and this is from The Wiz. This is a scene from the moment when Dorothy, played by Diana Ross, and the Scarecrow, played by Michael Jackson, are about to set out on the road. And the scene starts with the Scarecrow with Michael Jackson on the floor, and he's kind of like trying to pull himself up. And if you watch it, and I highly recommend, just Google Ease on Down the Road, you'll see the clip. The joy that both of those characters have for the journey that they're about to go on, you can feel it. Like they're kind of like having fun with it. They're reveling in it. It doesn't feel hard. It feels like something that they love and that they are excited about. And then as they start to move out onto the yellow brick road, they start to sing the song. And these are some of the lyrics from the song. You heard Carol sing, ease on down the road. The part that strikes me, and it's repeated multiple times in the song, is don't you carry nothing that might be a load. Because if you want that joy, if you want that ease, if you want that feeling of going out on the road and having that experience, you don't want to be carrying something that will be a load. And so as we talk about our theme this year, which is more, it's important that we ask ourselves, how do we do this? How do you get more without carrying that load? How do you have that experience where you can go out there and dance and do that amazing thing? And I don't know if you've seen this. It's amazing when you watch it again. Michael Jackson, as a Scarecrow, has these big old giant shoes on, and Diana Ross has like giant heels, and she's like dancing around. It's amazing. But how do you do this? Well, that is the subject of my talk today, which is on your mark, get set. You know you want to say it. Go. Yes, on your mark, get set, go. So we're going to talk about that. And I started to think about this year as a race. And I have some familiarity with hurdles. When I was in high school, I ran track, and these are the low hurdles. So a low hurdle versus a high hurdle. A low hurdle, you go about 3/4 of the way around the track, and you are supposed to jump over the hurdle. Do you guys see any metaphors possibly coming here? In order to finish the race. And so there's no way I was going to be able to do the high hurdles because you had to go like super high, and I was not that kind of athlete that could do that. In fact, I was barely the kind of athlete that could do the low hurdles. But as I think back to that, I ask myself, in a race, any race that you're running, what's the most important part of the race? Now, I sort of broke it down. It could be the finish line. It could be the middle of the race, or it could be the starting line. So the finish line, as we think about what we want in our lives, that's the achieving. It's the parking spot. The parking spot is the finish line when you pull into it. The middle is where you're doing the thing. And then the starting line is when you get started. So those are the three I'm thinking, well, what is the most important part of any race or anything that we're trying to achieve? And so I was thinking about picturing 2024 as a race. And I put on the stage here, just so I can visually think about it, a piece of tape here. So let's say this is the beginning of the year. We're close enough to January 1. Let's say this represents the beginning of the year. And then this is all of 2024 right here. And then this piece of tape is the end of the year. This is when I get to the thing that I said I wanted. So this entire stage right here is your year ahead. And whatever you're going to achieve, whatever you want, is going to be accomplished starting there, in here, finishing there. So then the question is, and this is where you could use your notebook, what do you want in 2024? I'm going to give you a couple areas that you could think about where many of us would say, oh yeah, I want that. Maybe you want improved health. Maybe you want to lose some weight. Maybe you want to have more energy, feel more vigorous. Maybe you want to get rid of some issues that health-wise that are happening. So that maybe that's a goal that you have for this year. Maybe in the area of time and money, maybe you want more time or more money or the right combination of those things. Maybe that's what you might write down. Or maybe you want a better relationship, a stronger relationship. Maybe you want a relationship. Whatever that thing is for you, I'm going to suggest it right now, and you probably already know what it is, whatever popped in your mind. Just jot it down on that little notebook. Whatever you're thinking, oh yeah, I'd like that in 2024. It doesn't have to be the perfect thing. I'll tell you, for me, this was very easy for me. At the end of December, when I was thinking about 2024 and what I wanted, I want to pass ministerial. That is the most important thing to me this year. That will hopefully happen in May/early June. So that's what I would have written down because that is the most meaningful thing to me this year. So if you write that down, and we'll come back to it in a second. So we come back to then finish, middle, start. Which is the most important? Which matters most? Well, let's look at all three of those one at a time. So is it the finish line? You can see this race here. You can kind of see the runner in the bottom of the picture. She's probably the winner, but she's falling to the track as she's winning, but that probably still counts. So I go, all right, is it the finish line? And Ernest Holmes maybe would talk about the finish line and say this, that the finish line is the mental equivalent. You would have a picture in mind that when I get to the end of 2024, I have a picture in mind of what I want to achieve. So that's the mental equivalent. You are creating the vision of what you want, the picture of you want. So let's say your goal is health. You want improved health. You want to have that strength and vitality that those two athletes have in that picture. Maybe that's what you want. Now, Thomas Troward, who we talk a lot about, one of his students, in fact, his only student, Genevieve Barron, wrote a book called Attaining Your Desires. And she gave a great description of what he calls sort of his idea of a mental equivalent, which is a spiritual prototype. And it's not the physical descriptors of the thing, but it's the feeling of what you want. So Thomas Troward would say, the spiritual prototype of this picture is not like, I want one of those cool horizontal fireplaces and I want an 80-inch TV. He's saying, what's the feeling you want when you are in that room? Is it, I want security, I want warmth, I want connectedness to the people, the family and friends that I share in that room. So that would be the spiritual prototype. And so both, I think, Troward and Holmes would agree that the important thing is that you want to feel that finish line, that I want to feel what it feels like when I get there. I'll give you an example in my own personal life. You know, I wrote a book, and before I finished with the book, I had created the artwork that you see there, and I printed it out on a piece of paper. And before the book existed in form, I'm like, you know what I'm going to do is find another book on my shelf that is about the same size and dimension as my book, and I'm going to take my cover and paste it onto that book. This is the actual book. So it's another book I found that I knew would be about the right size, and then I pasted my artwork on the cover of it. I will tell you that the moment that I did that, and it literally was just when it was on there, and I held it in my hands, I remember that so clearly. It was like about 8 o'clock at night, and I walked down the hallway, and I think I was almost crying as I took it to show Aaron and said, this is what my book will feel like. That's the power of feeling the thing, because you'll know in that moment, like, this is profound. So maybe the finish line is the most important part. Maybe that's the thing that matters the most. But let me ask you a question. Can you finish a race you don't even run? Maybe not. So then maybe the middle part of the race is the most important part of the race. Now, for a lot of us, that middle part of the race is where, just like in this picture, you're running with other people, right? So you might see all of those other people, I mean, not as competition in the sense that we all want different things, but you can look at other people and see them as on the same path, and somehow now you get out of your game. You're not thinking about your race, you're running their race. So This is Usain Bolt. He is the fastest man alive. He still holds a record for the 100-meter dash. 9.85 seconds is his world record from like 2008, I think, still stands today. So if I'm on the track with Usain Bolt, let's say for a miraculous reason, I qualify for the Olympics from like a tiny little country that's like, yeah, Thor, you could be our 100-meter runner. And I end up on the track with Usain Bolt. What am I likely to think when I'm on the mark right next to Usain Bolt? I have no chance, right? I will probably still be in the starting block when he's already like this going across the line. So I'm going to compare myself to him. So this is what I think we can do sometimes, is we compare ourselves to other people. Maybe we do this in finance and work. I could look at someone that's a contemporary of mine and go, they're already retired. I'm just getting started, but they're already at this point of the game. They have this much, they have that, or their job is great, and I'm still working at what I'm doing. So I might look at that. I might, in the area of health and fitness, I might go to the gym and go, well, they look amazing. Why am I not getting those results? So again, I'm comparing myself to them. Or relationships and love. Maybe you look around and you go, gosh, that couple, they seem like they're so happy. What are they doing? And then before you know it, you get to the point where you're comparing yourself to them. Holmes, I think, would talk about this as race consciousness. So the race consciousness is society, it's culture, it's everything telling you this is what your life should look like. It's advertising saying you'll be happy when you use our toothpaste or whatever it is. And so we compare ourselves to other people in those areas. I'm reading Emerson now, and in his essay, Self-Reliance, he says this: "These roses under my window make no reference to former roses or to better ones. They exist with God today. There is simply the rose. It is perfect in every moment of existence." Another quote that I love, John Acuff, New York Times bestselling author, he says, "Don't compare your beginning to somebody else's middle or your middle to somebody else's end." You are running your own race. This picture could be with other athletes, but she is running her own race, and that's all that matters. So my suggestion is, as you're racing through 24, as you're doing the things, run your own race. So maybe the race itself is the most important part. Though I have another question. What's the one thing you have to do to get in the race? Yes, you have to start the race. You have to get off the blocks. If I'm staying here, I'm not in the race. So start for more in 2024. Reverend Dr. Tiffany just told us about that, about what she's doing to start for more in 24. So whether you are in a race or you have goals, you have to start them. So Holmes said this about starting: spirit is the starting point of everything. Meaning that energy, that creative energy that is all around you, that is the starting place, because that's where all of these ideas come from. That energy that I'm surrounded by, the things that I write down in my notebook, they don't come from me. They come from this quantum field that I'm in that says, oh, this would be a good idea for Thor. Let's have him write this down. So he also said conscious thought is the starting point of any new creation. So I have to receive this idea, but then I have to write it down. I have to think about it and go, yes, that is a great idea. I'm going to write that down, and that is the starting point of this. So I'm thinking about starting, and someone, maybe Mindy said it right away, it seems like starting is kind of an obvious thing that we all know how to do, right? I mean, we know how to start a car. We know how to start a book. We can start the remote, a job. We can start a diet. Although it's now the third week of January, and I just read this statistic, like 48% of all people who started a diet on January 1, by now, they've abandoned it. So maybe we don't completely know everything about how to start. So maybe it's worth looking at how to start and be successful at it. We talk about starting, but we don't. Why is that? I have a couple of reasons, and I want to talk about the reasons why. Now, I'll go back to the song, "Don't You Carry Nothing That Might Be a Load." I think this is one reason why we don't start as much, because when we're standing here on the starting line, we've got all these things that are loading us down, all the reasons why I can't do something, the reasons why I will be judged, the reasons why someone else will be better at it. So I'm not even in the race. I'm still stuck on the starting block, and Usain Bolt is already like, he's probably across the courtyard here while I'm still sitting there on the starting line. So to illustrate this point, I want to play a little game. I don't know if you know the game Family Feud, but in Family Feud, they ask a bunch of people questions and come up with answers, and then we guess what the answers are. So we're going to do that now. So the question that I asked is, what's something you shouldn't carry because it might be a load? All right, so these are things that weigh you down. So shout out, what are some things? Okay, I think I heard it. And fear of failure. Yes, we're afraid that if I am on this starting line and I take off, that I'm going to trip and look ridiculous, and all the NBC cameras are going to be like, they're not even going to look at Usain Bolt, they're going to be like, Thor Challgren just tripped. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So we think that we don't start, and that fear of failure weighs us down. So what's something else that you might say weighs you down? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's a good one. I think I heard this one. Fear of judgment. We're going to be judged. Like someone's going to look at me on this starting line and go, does he realize he's in the race with Usain Bolt? Who does he think he is? So we can do that where thinking about being judged will prevent us from getting in the race. So last one, what's something that weighs you down? Guilt is time. Yeah. I think I heard this one. Yeah. Oh. Perfectionism. Yes. Perfectionism. Now, I will say for me, this is a big one. And Dr. James will be, in about 15 seconds, will be nodding his head vigorously at what I'm about to say, which is that 6 years ago when I first started, if he came to me and said, hey, I want to do this, can we do this? My default, and this is where he's nodding, would be to say, oh, no, we can't do that. And it wasn't that we couldn't. It was that I wanted to do it perfectly. I didn't want to fail at it. I wanted it. So my default was perfectionism. And that's always been the thing up until recently. I will say, being in practitioner studies and being in ministerial, I'm letting go of that. But perfectionism is one of those things. So I think the reason that we talk about starting, but we don't do it, is perfectionism. So I want to give you an example of someone for whom that is not an issue. So if you think about someone, say, in the last 20 years, who you might think as like the perfect fitness influencer, someone who, an influencer is like someone who goes on social media and says, hey, I've got it all figured out. You should do things like me. Who would you say in the last 20, 30 years would be someone that would be, if you think about fitness, would be like, oh yeah, that's the gold standard. I mean, you might say someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, all sorts of people that would go, yes, that is the perfect example. I bet that when I asked that question, and if you did, if this is the first person you thought, please raise your hand, because I'm going to somehow give you like a gold prize or something. I bet you did not think of this person.
I did.
Did you really? Okay, awesome. So, all right. So tell me. So, Dr. Kirby, why did you think of Richard Simmons?
I actually saw a short film yesterday of Pauly Shore.
Yes.
Being Richard Simmons.
Yes.
And his guidance was so beautiful. It was to let yourself eat the donut once in a while and love yourself.
Yeah. So thank you. And Richard Simmons, this is one of those ones, I mean, if you think about someone that you would think of as perfect, he would have been on that starting line for 20, 30 years, right? Because he would have been like, well, look at me. Like, I'm kind of skinny. I got funny looking hair. I've, for some reason, chosen to wear these dolphin shorts that everyone is going to mock me for. I'm not perfect. I shouldn't be in this place. And yet Richard Simmons, if he were here today and standing on that stage, or Pauly Shore maybe even, I think what Richard would say is start. Look how it worked out for Richard Simmons. He inspired people because he didn't care how he looked. He didn't care about being judged, failing, or perfectionism. He said, I am going to get to the starting line and I'm going to get into the race. I'm reading a book right now that is, I highly recommend this book called Hidden Potential, The Science of Achieving Greater Things by Adam Grant. He talks a lot in this book about the idea of perfectionism, and he has something, I'm going to do my best to describe this. There's a picture in the book where he describes this, and you can see it is a spiral. And at the top of the spiral, it says, try something new, then make a mistake. Then after that, it says, I'll never do that again. And following that, try something new, make a mistake, I'll never do that again. Your comfort zone gets smaller. So what's happening as you're going through this, your comfort zone keeps getting smaller and smaller. And in contrast to Emerson in his essay Circles, he said you should constantly be expanding your circle. Make it bigger. Move into the places that you aren't comfortable. You can't see it probably, but in the middle, where the spiral ends, it says, I'll never do that again. Your comfort zone gets smaller. You don't try anything new. Now you're stuck. That is the consequence of perfectionism. Now you're stuck. In chapter 3 of the book, called The Imperfectionists, he has a quote, says, unlocking hidden potential is not about the pursuit of perfection. And the more you grow, the better you know which flaws are acceptable. So when you're in the race, you'll discover, like, oh, I need to do this differently. I need to do that differently. I'll go back to the picture of the hurdles. If you don't know, in a hurdle, the way that they're designed is the back part of the hurdle on the ground is weighted. So that if I'm going over the hurdle and I knock it with my foot, the hurdle may go over and then it will bounce back. So when you are in the race, you'll discover, like, oh, on that last hurdle, I hit it because I did this. But if you keep going on the next one, you may go over it. And here's what's really fascinating to me. If you think about where we are, when you're in the race, you are being assisted by that quantum field that will get you over those hurdles. But you can't do it if you don't start. So I'm going to go back to, what did you write down for a thing that you said you wanted for 2024? My suggestion, my encouragement to you is to start today. Whatever that is, start where you are. In the third chapter of Science of Mind, this is the third week, we're talking about the first 4 chapters of Science of Mind. The chapter, What It Does, Ernest Holmes says, if we wish a certain good, he italicizes certain, so we're talking about a specific thing we want. We must instill into our own minds a realization of this good, and then, as this idea is the mold we place in mind, it will be filled by the substance necessary for the complete manifestation of this good in our lives. And you can imagine, you see that picture there of mold. Think of, you're creating the little mold, the mental equivalent, and the universe is just pouring that molten in, going, I'll make that for you. I'll make that for you. I'll make that happen. So the race, this part where you are now, this takes place in the quantum field. So if you imagine where you start the race and now you're in here and everything is happening for you, this is where you are assisted by the quantum field. So again, I encourage you to start for more in 2024. And I'm going to give you guys the last word on the talk. So if I say, on your mark, get set, what do you say? Go, start. Perfect. I love it. Namaste.